She almost didn't go inside. She sat in her car for a full 10 minutes, engine off, looking at the front door of a house she hadn't been inside in 2 years. The paint was peeling. The garden her mother had tended every spring was overgrown. The mailbox was still crooked from the time her father backed into it in 1987 and never fixed it. Her name was Sarah Calloway, 47 years old, middle child of 3. The one who had driven 40 minutes every other Sunday for the last 4 years to sit with her mother. The one who had handled the hospital paperwork, the medication schedules, the calls to the insurance company that nobody else had time for. And now, 3 weeks after the funeral, she was sitting alone in a car outside her mother's house, while her brother David was already talking to a real estate agent and her sister Michelle was asking the estate lawyer about liquidating Timeline. The house had been left to all 3 of them equally. David and Michelle both wanted to sell immediately. Sarah had asked for time. They gave her 30 days. She wasn't sure why she wanted it. The house needed work she couldn't afford. It was 40 minutes from her apartment. It made no financial sense on paper. But something in her couldn't let it go to strangers in 30 days without at least walking through it one more time. She got out of the car and went inside. The smell hit her first. Old wood and her mother's hand lotion and something underneath both of those things that she couldn't name but recognized instantly as simply home. She stood in the hallway for a moment, not moving, letting it settle over her. Then she got to work. She had brought boxes and garbage bags and cleaning supplies. Her plan was simple: sort through what was left, box anything worth keeping, and make a decision about the house at the end of the 30 days with clear eyes instead of grief-clouded ones. David and Michelle had already gone through the house once, the week of the funeral, taking the things they wanted: the good jewelry, the china set, the antique side table from the living room that Michelle had claimed years ago in casual conversation the way Michelle always claimed things, by simply saying "that's mine" often enough that everyone started to believe it. What was left was the furniture nobody wanted, the clothes that would go to donation, and the slow, intimate archaeology of a life, the things in drawers and closets and boxes that don't get taken at first pass because they don't look valuable until you actually look. Sarah started in the kitchen, then the living room, then the bedrooms. Hours passed. It was quiet work, punctuated only by the sound of tape on boxes and her own breathing. She was in the back bedroom closet, the one her mother used as a linen storage space, when she found the box. It was wooden, about the size of a shoebox, sitting beneath 2 folded quilts on the top shelf. She almost didn't reach for it, but something made her pull it down. She carried it to the kitchen table and set it under the light. Inside were envelopes, 12 of them, maybe more, each one sealed. Each one with a name written on the front in her mother's careful cursive handwriting. Some were addressed to David, some to Michelle, some to relatives she recognized, and some to names she didn't. And at the very bottom of the box, sitting alone, separated from the others by a piece of folded cloth, one envelope with a single word on the front: Sarah. She sat down slowly. She looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she set it aside and picked up the others first, because that was the kind of person she was. She took care of everything else before she got to herself. She opened the ones addressed to David first. Inside was a letter in her mother's handwriting, 2 pages, dated 8 months before she passed. She began to read. By the second paragraph, she understood that these weren't new letters. They were unsent ones. Letters her mother had written but never mailed, never given, never spoken aloud. Letters that said the things a woman raised to keep peace in a family never said at the kitchen table. The letter to David was gentle but honest. Her mother wrote about how much she loved him, and in the same breath, with the same quiet pen, wrote about how she had noticed over the years that his visits came more frequently when he needed something, advice, money, a signature on something, and less frequently when he didn't. She wrote that she forgave him for it because she understood it, because her own father had been the same way, and she knew that sometimes people love you and still take you for granted without meaning to. She wrote that she hoped he would learn, before it was too late, to show up for people when he needed nothing from them. That was the only way to really show up at all. Sarah set that letter down and sat quietly for a moment. Then she opened Michelle's. The letter to Michelle was shorter, more careful. Her mother had chosen each word the way you choose words when you love someone and have decided to tell them the truth anyway. She wrote about the phone calls that lasted 5 minutes because Michelle was always about to go somewhere. She wrote about the Christmas 3 years ago when Michelle had arrived 2 hours late and left 2 hours early and spent the time in between on her phone. She wrote that she had never said anything because she didn't want Michelle to feel guilty, and then she wrote, and this was the line that made Sarah put the letter flat on the table and press her hands over it. She wrote, "I think my silence was a kindness that became a disservice. You deserved the truth more than you deserved my comfort." Sarah looked out the kitchen window for a long time after that. She thought about all the Christmases she had arrived early and stayed late, all the Sunday drives, all the phone calls that lasted as long as they needed to last. All the times she had sat in hospital waiting rooms alone because David was traveling and Michelle was busy and someone had to be there. She had never done those things expecting recognition. She had done them because her mother was her mother, and that was simply what you did. But she had spent years wondering, in the quiet way you wonder about things you never say out loud, whether any of it was seen. She picked up the envelope at the bottom of the box, the one with just her name on it, and she opened it. There were 4 separate pages inside, folded together. The handwriting was slightly more unsteady than the others, written later, Sarah guessed, when the arthritis had gotten worse. But every word was clear. "My Sarah," the letter began. "I am writing this one last because I had to think longest about what to say to you. Not because I love you less, because I love you in the way that is hardest to put into words. The way you love someone who has never once made you wonder if they love you back." Sarah stopped reading. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She kept going. Her mother wrote about the Sunday visits. She wrote about them one by one. Not all of them, but specific ones Sarah had forgotten. The Sunday in February when it had snowed and Sarah had come anyway, and they had watched an old movie together and her mother had fallen asleep in the chair and Sarah had stayed another 2 hours just so she wouldn't wake up alone. Her mother had not been asleep. She had kept her eyes closed because she hadn't wanted Sarah to leave, and she hadn't wanted to say so because asking people to stay had always felt like too much to ask. Sarah was crying now, quietly. In the kitchen of the house she had not been sure she wanted, and she did not stop reading. Her mother wrote about the hospital paperwork. She wrote, "I know what it cost you in time and energy, and I know you never once mentioned it. I also know your brother and sister never once asked what it cost you. I want you to know that I noticed both of those things." Then her mother wrote about the savings account. It was a small account, her mother explained. Opened 11 years ago at a different bank than the one the family used, specifically so it would not appear in the estate. Not a fortune, but not nothing. Enough to matter. The details were in a second folded paper inside the envelope. Account number, bank name, everything Sarah would need. Her mother had consulted a financial advisor about how to do it cleanly. It had taken her 3 appointments. She had told no one. It was not the main inheritance, her mother wrote. The house was always going to be divided 3 ways because the law and the family peace required it. But I wanted something that was only yours, something they could not divide or argue over or take. Something I chose to give you alone, not because you are better than them, but because I saw you when you thought nobody was looking, and I wanted you to know that. Sarah put the letter down. She looked around the kitchen, at the old linoleum floor her mother had always meant to replace, at the window above the sink where her mother had kept a small ceramic pot of herbs every summer, at the crooked cabinet door on the left that her father had always meant to fix. She was not crying anymore. She was something past crying, something quieter and deeper than that. Something that felt, after years of giving without being asked, and staying without being thanked, and showing up without being celebrated, remarkably like being seen. There was one more page, the last one. Her mother had written, I left you the letters instead of leaving you a speech at the funeral because I knew you would be the one to actually clean this house. I knew you would find the box. David would have hired someone. Michelle would have asked you to handle it. You were always the one who actually did the thing that needed doing, quietly, without announcement. I hid them where only you would look. The house is not the inheritance, Sarah. The letters are. The house is just the reason you came back one more time. Take care of it if you want to. Sell it if you need to. But know that I left it to all three of you equally because that was the right thing to do on paper, and I left everything else to you alone because that was the true thing to do in my heart. I saw you, my girl. I always saw you. All my love, Mom Sarah sat in that kitchen for a long time after she finished reading. She sat until the light through the window changed from afternoon to evening. She sat until the old refrigerator cycled on and then off again. She sat the way her mother used to sit in that same chair at that same table, unhurried, settled, like someone who had learned a long time ago that some moments deserve more than a glance. Then she folded the letters carefully, put them back in the envelope, and looked around the kitchen again. She called her landlord the next morning and gave notice on her apartment. She called a contractor the day after that. She did not call David or Michelle, not because she was hiding anything. The account was legally hers, confirmed by the bank the same week, as clean and simple as her mother had promised, but because some things don't require an announcement. The house needed a new roof and the garden needed work, and the crooked cabinet door on the left still needed to be fixed. She started with the garden. 6 months later, a neighbor stopped her on the front path on a Sunday morning and said the place was looking beautiful and asked if she'd lived there long. Sarah thought about it for a moment, about the Sunday drives, the hospital waiting rooms, the letters in the wooden box, the ceramic pot of herbs she had replanted in the same window above the sink. Just moved in, she said, but I've been coming here my whole life. Some people spend their whole lives being the one who shows up, the one who stays, the one who does the thing that needs doing without waiting to be asked, and they do it without a receipt, without an audience, without the expectation of anything in return. But sometimes, not always, not on a schedule, not in the way you planned for, the people you showed up for were paying attention the whole time. They just wrote it down instead of saying it out loud. If you have ever been the one who stayed when everyone else left, this story was for you.